The gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Hill, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to have this hearing. Kraninger, I want to commend you for leading the agency during this very difficult time of COVID-19. Given the current economy, many of us in Arkansas and many of our families have been really navigating a tough consumer financial space. I want to thank you, the agency, for doing a number of good updates and helpful aspects to your website. We've been using these routinely newsletters we send out several times a week on the COVID-19 crisis, and the material has been very beneficial to consumers. So please thank your team for the extra efforts to communicate. I want to touch, Director, on the topic that Dr. Foster spent quite a bit of time on, which is your revisions for the qualified mortgage rule. He walked through, I think, the background quite clearly, and a lot of us are concerned about will this rule approach that you're taking, that you put out for comment, lead us down a road towards weaker credit underwriting by the banks or by the federal entities that insure or purchase those loans. And you did a good job answering his question, so I won't belabor that point, that the DTI is just one of many considerations to be taken in underwriting. But since that's true, what's your philosophy here? I mean, all bankers take into a variety of compensating factors when underwriting a loan. Why do you view that it's necessary to replace the DTI definition with something that appears pretty open-ended?
I think, Congressman, and appreciate your interest in this. It's an important marketplace, clearly, for mortgages for many Americans. The point that you just made is precisely why we're moving from DTI solely to a pricing approach, because it really does bring in the more holistic considerations of the borrower's creditworthiness. And certainly you would expect and want responsible lenders to be pricing in the risk that they see. And that's a different approach than a hard debt-to-income ratio that, frankly, at 43%, but frankly, as we looked at what would be an acceptable DTI threshold if you were going to stay at that. And we, in fact, asked that question in the rulemaking. But clearly at 43%, we know we're keeping a lot of creditworthy borrowers, and particularly borrowers of color, out of the qualified mortgage market.
Thank you for that. Do you have any concern about that granting a safe harbor to underwriting standards, third-party guidelines could be too open-ended? Are you concerned about that?
So it isn't just third-party arbitrarily. It is third-party guidelines that we would have to actually recognize. So there is that check in the process. And I think I'm sorry, sir.
Your agency approve those guidelines?
Yes, that is what is proposed.
Okay.
So it would allow innovation.
Let me switch subjects, talk about the difference between the 150 basis points pricing range that you've considered, and yet for the safe harbor, you think it should be 200 points for the QM. Don't you think that spread could do two things? One, create a potential for misunderstanding and lawsuits, and that it would actually deter private sector players from making the loan, and could that even shift it more to a government type loan, such as an FHA loan? Are you concerned about that spread?
Well, certainly it's a proposal, Congressman, so we absolutely want comment on that to the extent that anyone in the public has data that would demonstrate a greater risk. We outlined, why we chose that threshold, and it's not too different from the thresholds that are already recognized in the current QM, because there is a pricing threshold differential between the safe harbor and the rebuttable presumption now. So the APR-APOR spread is something that's in the current system. But again, looking at, we looked closely at performance over the last many years. That data is in the rule, and we welcome comments on, alternate concepts or risks that might be introduced here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.